Inside his Lekki mansion, with all the cars, lands, and hotels a man could dream of, Chief Adewale sat in his expansive study, surrounded by symbols of wealth that others only prayed for, yet his heart carried a weight that money could never lift. The chandelier above cast a golden glow on the polished mahogany desk, but its warmth could not chase away the cold that had taken root in his spirit. His hands, once strong enough to sign million-naira deals with confidence, trembled as he reached for the framed family portrait resting near his reading lamp. He traced the faces with his fingers. His wife, Funka, elegant in her gale and lace. His sons, Kunle and Tunde, dressed in sharp agbadas. His daughters, Yetunde and Rose, one with the poise of Lagos society, the other with the innocence of a child who still believed love was pure. The more he stared, the heavier his chest felt, until the question rose in his mind like smoke from a smoldering fire. Who among these people truly loves me beyond my money? Who will sit beside me when my body is weak, when my voice is faint, when I can no longer provide for them? Who will stand by me, not for inheritance, but for love? The silence of the study answered him cruelly. He had built empires in Victoria Island and Abuja, expanded businesses across Nigeria, and sponsored countless people through school. Yet in the face of age and frailty, he realized he might be nothing more than a bank account to his own blood. His wealth had brought respect, but had it brought love? He leaned back in his leather chair, the frame creaking as though even it understood his burden. His eyes grew moist, but the chief of Lagos high society refused to let the tears fall. Instead, he pressed a button on his desk phone. Moments later, Barrister John, his lawyer of 25 years, a man whose loyalty had been proven in courts and contracts, entered the study with his brown folder tucked under his arm. Behind him was Dr. Maxwell, the family doctor who had treated Adewale through malaria, typhoid, and hypertension, and who had seen him rise from a hustling trader in Balogun Market to one of Nigeria's wealthiest men. "My people," Chief Adewale began, his voice low but heavy. "I have called you here tonight because there is a fire in my chest, and I must quench it before it burns me completely. I want to test my family. I want to know the truth." The two men exchanged puzzled looks before leaning closer. "What truth, sir?" Barrister John asked carefully. Chief Adewale lifted the family portrait again and held it before them. "The truth of love. I want to pretend that I'm very sick, that death is already knocking. I want to see who in this family truly loves me and who is simply waiting for my funeral to share properties and sign documents. Tell me, barrister, tell me, doctor, is this madness or is it wisdom?" The lawyer sighed, adjusted his glasses, and lowered his voice. "Sir, it is not madness. It is wisdom. But if this is the path you want to walk, we must be very careful. Greed can wear many disguises. First, you must hide a portion of your wealth. Allow me to open a new Zenith bank account in another name, and we will move half of your assets there. That way, if their eyes shine too much, they will not find all your treasures." Dr. Maxwell nodded slowly. "And if I may add, Chief, let me be the messenger of fate. I will declare you to be in the last stage of cancer, 6 months left at most. They will believe it, and in their belief, their true characters will come out. You will not need to say anything, Baba. Just lie down, cough, and watch." For the first time in weeks, Chief Adewale gave a faint smile, though it was laced with sorrow. "Olorin," he whispered in Yoruba, "show me true hearts. Expose every pretender in this house that night." The decision was sealed. Barrister John left with files tucked tightly under his arm, prepared to secure the future of his client's wealth. Dr. Maxwell rehearsed the speech he would give to the family, and Chief Adewale, the billionaire who owned estates in Ikoyi, hotels in Abuja, and lands stretching across Ogun State, began to practice his performance as a dying man. The next morning, the mansion corridors echoed with a new sound. It was not the usual brisk footsteps of maids carrying trays of jollof rice, nor the cheerful banter of drivers waiting to ferry Madame to her friends' gatherings. Instead, it was the hollow, deliberate cough of the patriarch, echoing through the marble halls like the cry of a wounded animal. The maids froze in the kitchen, eyes wide. Gardeners exchanged nervous glances. Even the gateman whispered by the gate, "Oga no well, Abi." This coughed a serious one. In the sitting room, Madame Funk looked up from her iPhone, frowning as the cough rose again from upstairs. "What is this cough that will not stop?" she muttered, but she did not climb the stairs. Servants whispered louder now, their Yoruba tongues heavy with worry. "Abi Baba de die?" one asked. "God forbid," another replied, crossing herself. But their eyes told another story. Fear mixed with curiosity, curiosity mixed with greed. Chief Adewale lay on his massive bed, a white agbada draped loosely over his frail frame. He pressed a hand to his chest, letting the coughs grow deeper, more painful. With every cough, he thought of his children's faces and wondered which of them would stand by him and which of them would circle above him like vultures waiting for their share. The night dragged on slowly, the air thick with tension. By dawn, the stage was set. Dr. Maxwell had arrived early, carrying his stethoscope, medical bag, and a face painted with sorrow he did not feel. He exchanged a silent look with Chief Adewale before climbing the stairs to begin his role in the drama. The family was called into the sitting room. Servants scattered, rushing to alert madam, sons, and daughters. Chairs were pulled, slippers slapped against marble floors, and soon the Adewale children and their mother sat together, their eyes wide, their hearts pounding. Dr. Maxwell descended the stairs slowly, his shoulders heavy, his face clouded, his words prepared. The next morning. Doctor. Maxwell gathers the family in the sitting room, the verdict about to fall. When the word cancer dropped, the marble floor of the Lekki mansion seemed to crack under the weight. Dr. Maxwell's voice trembled as he delivered the blow, though deep inside he knew this was all performance. Still, he carried the expression of a man burdened with sorrow, his face twisted into practiced grief. He looked at the Adewale family gathered in the spacious sitting room, their wide eyes fixed on him, their breath suspended in disbelief. "Baba is very sick," he said slowly, each word dragging across the air like the tolling of a church bell. "He has cancer. Stage 4. I'm afraid. He has only 6 months left." The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, even the sound of the ceiling fan seemed to fade, and the only thing anyone could hear was the thunderous pounding of their own hearts. Then, like water breaking through a dam, wailing erupted. Madame Funka Adewale, the chief's wife of 35 years, shot up from her seat, placed both hands on her head, and screamed in Yoruba, "Oluwa o! Egbami o! My husband, 6 months?" Her gal slipped slightly to the side as she staggered back into her chair, her eyes darting wildly between her children and the doctor. Kunle, the eldest son, forced himself to remain composed. Straightening his agbada, he spoke in a steady but tight voice. "We must stand strong. Baba needs us more than ever. We cannot let him see us crumble." His words sounded noble, but his eyes flickered briefly toward the grand staircase that led to his father's study, as though already imagining himself sitting at the patriarch's desk. Tunda, the second son, sat stiffly, his arms crossed, his brows furrowed so deeply they looked like scars. He said nothing, but his silence spoke volumes. His eyes were restless, shifting from Dr. Maxwell's face to his mother's sobbing form, then finally to the floor. He looked like a man already calculating, already thinking beyond tears. Yetunde, the first daughter, burst into loud sobs, falling to her knees in front of the sofa. "Daddy, no! God forbid, you cannot leave us!" Her cries echoed against the tall walls of the mansion, where portraits of Chief Adewale in better days now seemed to watch in judgment. But Rose, the youngest, did not weep. She sat beside her father, clutching his hand tightly in both of hers. Her eyes brimmed with tears, but her lips trembled with determination. She leaned close, whispering, "I will not leave you, Baba. I will stay." Her words were almost swallowed by the noise of mourning, but Chief Adewale heard them clearly, behind his weak cough and she. Tired eyes, his heart ached with both pain and gratitude. He had expected pretense, but Rose's grip told him one thing money could never buy: genuine love. Servants rushed about, bringing water, fanning Madame Funka, trying to calm Yetunde, while the doctor maintained his act with a slow shake of his head. "Prepare yourselves," he said heavily. "It will not be easy." By noon, the news had traveled beyond the mansion walls. In Lagos, gossip moves faster than the speed of light, carried by drivers, maids, and distant relatives who had long been waiting for such whispers. Within hours, the Adewale family name was once again on every tongue, but this time, not because of wealth or charity, but because of impending death. "Chief Adewale is dying," people murmured in markets, offices, and roadside bukas. 6 months to live. Neighbors arrived at the mansion bearing gifts, fruits, baskets of yams, crates of malt, bottles of wine. Their faces wore masks of sympathy, but behind the masks, their whispers betrayed their thoughts. Some leaned close to one another and said, "Who will inherit all that wealth? Kunle will take over, Abi. Or maybe Tunde. You know women, they won't give Rose anything." Others said, "That company in Victoria Island, will it survive? Once Baba dies, those children will scatter everything." Chief Adewale lay in his bed, propped up by soft pillows, listening. He watched his family cry. He heard his wife's constant lament, and he observed how quickly neighbors came not just to comfort, but to calculate. His body looked weak, but his mind was sharper than ever. Every reaction was being recorded in the depths of his heart. Every word was noted. He coughed again, long and dry, and the room quieted briefly before the noise resumed. Barrister John, who had remained in a corner of the sitting room during the chaos, closed his folder with a sigh. His eyes scanned the family, then rested on Chief Adewale, whose tired gaze met his for only a moment. The lawyer knew what the old man was thinking. They had agreed to this plan, but now that the performance was unfolding, the pain of reality was almost too much to bear. Quietly, without a word, Barrister John slipped out of the mansion, shaking his head as he descended the marble steps. He muttered under his breath, "May God help this family. Greed will soon show its face." By evening, the atmosphere in the mansion had shifted entirely. Where laughter and chatter once filled the dining room, now silence reigned. Servants moved about cautiously, their steps soft as though afraid to disturb a house already mourning a man not yet gone. Rose remained at her father's 3 love turns into excuses. A week later. Love has a short memory when wealth whispers louder. The first week after Dr. Maxwell's pronouncement was heavy with sorrow and tension, yet it carried a strange sweetness too. Death, or at least the rumor of it, had the power to temporarily soften hearts. In those first days, the Adewale mansion became a place of constant devotion, filled with prayers, tears, and promises of love. Madame Funk, who had built her reputation as the strong matriarch of the family, spent hours beside her husband's bed, crying and praying loudly in Yoruba. "Jesu majiki oko miku, Olua, please don't take my husband. I reject death. I reject it in Jesus' name." She knelt by the bedside, hands raised, her jeel leaning sideways as sweat dripped down her face. Her prayers were so loud that even the gateman outside could hear her voice quivering through the walls. Yetunde, the eldest daughter, sang worship songs softly while holding her father's frail hand. Her voice was shaky, but her intentions seemed genuine as she whispered the lyrics of old hymns their father used to sing on Sunday mornings. The songs echoed through the mansion, momentarily wrapping the family in a fragile cocoon of faith and comfort. Rose, the youngest and most tender-hearted, became her father's shadow. She spoon-fed him pap carefully, blowing gently on each scoop to make sure it was not too hot. When his forehead glistened with sweat, she wiped it away with a soft white towel. When his cough racked his chest, she rubbed his back gently and whispered, "Baba, I am here. You will not suffer alone." Her eyes rarely left him, and when they did, it was only to fetch water, medicine, or fresh clothes. But behind the facade of care, cracks were already beginning to form. Kunla, the eldest son, whose voice had been steady when he urged the family to stand strong, began to show his true concerns. Every time he entered his father's bedroom, his eyes drifted not to the weak body on the bed, but to the mahogany study table in the corner, where company files and ledgers were stacked neatly. Late at night, when he thought no one was watching, he lingered longer in the study, flipping through papers, scanning financial statements, and muttering under his breath. He had inherited his father's ambition, but not his patience. Tunda, the second son, who had been quiet during the doctor's announcement, became restless. His phone rang constantly, and he answered in hushed tones on the balcony, pacing back and forth as though the house itself were too small for his plans. "Yes, I will travel," he said on one call. "Business cannot stop because of sickness." When Rose overheard him, her heart sank. She wanted to confront him, but the words stuck in her throat. By the second week, the devotion that had filled the mansion began to fade. The prayers became shorter, the hymns less frequent, even the tears dried up. One by one, the excuses started to creep in, as subtle as the harmattan dust that slips in through closed windows. "I'm too busy," Yetunde murmured when Rose asked her to stay longer with their father. "There are calls I need to make, clients to attend to." "Daddy will understand. I cannot watch him suffer like this." Madame Funk sighed dramatically one afternoon, standing at the doorway of the bedroom. "It breaks my heart too much. I need to rest in another room." She gathered her pillows and moved to a guest bedroom, leaving Rose to tend to their father alone. Even Kunle, whose bold voice had declared, "We must be strong," stopped coming upstairs as often. Instead, he was seen more frequently leaving the house in crisp suits, his car engine roaring out of the compound early in the mornings. The company was calling him, or rather, he was calling the company to himself. Only Rose remained constant. Every night, she lay on a small mat beside her father's bed, her hand resting gently on his arm so he would know she was there. Each time he coughed, she sat up quickly, offering him water, adjusting his pillows, whispering softly, "You are not alone, Baba." "I will not leave you." Chief Adewale, lying there with his eyes half closed, felt a mixture of gratitude and heartbreak. Gratitude because one child still loved him for who he was, not for what he had. Heartbreak because the rest of the family was already drifting away, as though his wealth was a candle that had burned out and left only smoke. One night, after Funk had settled into another room, after Kunle had returned the late smelling of expensive cologne, and after Tunda had spent hours on his phone without checking on him, Chief Adewale lay awake. His cough echoed in the stillness of the room, yet no footsteps came. The mansion, once alive with the sound of laughter, parties, and music, now felt hollow, as though it were waiting for something terrible to happen. Only Rose stirred, rising to pour him a glass of warm water. She placed the cup to his lips and whispered, "Drink small, Baba. It will help." He drank slowly, then pulled her hand closer, his voice faint but clear enough to break her heart. "Saint a family be this?" he whispered in Yoruba. "Is this family? Is this the legacy I built with sweat and blood?" Rose pressed his hand tightly, fighting back her tears. "Baba, don't think too much. You still have me. I will never leave you." He closed his eyes, pretending to drift into sleep, but in truth, his mind was wide awake, replaying every moment of neglect. The test he had set in motion was revealing more than he had feared. Wealth had blinded them. Love had turned into excuses. Loyalty had evaporated. Only Rose remained as a flickering candle in a mansion filled with shadows. As dawn broke, the golden rays of sunlight spilled into the room, but they did nothing to warm his cold heart. He lay still, his cough harsher, his breath slower. Rose had dozed off on the mat, her hands still locked around his. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Chief Adewale's eyes shifted toward the door, where the polished brass handle began to turn. The study door creaked open, and there stood Kunle, not with medicine, not with food, but with company. Papers clutched tightly in his hand, his eyes gleaming with ambition. Cliffhanger. The study door creaks open. Kunle steps in holding company papers eyed, helping him sip water from a glass. Yetunde had retreated to her room, her sobs muffled behind closed doors. Tunde sat alone on the balcony, smoking slowly, his face hidden in the shadows. Kunle lingered near the study, pacing like a lion in a cage, his jaw tight, his mind restless. Madame Funk stayed in the living room, sighing loudly, making calls to her church prayer group, already dramatizing her role as the grieving wife. Chief Adewale watched it all through half-closed eyes. His coughs grew more convincing, his voice fainter. He played his role, but behind it, he was a man bleeding inside. He had asked for truth, and truth was already beginning to unfold. By nightfall, one child already plans to step into his father's shoes before the man is even buried. The ink of ambition flows faster than the ink of blood. Kunle stood at the edge of his father's bed, clutching the stack of company documents he'd carried from the study. His face was calm, but his eyes betrayed the fire burning inside him. For years, he had lived in the shadow of Chief Adewale's towering reputation, watching his father command boardrooms, sign billion-naira contracts, and bend markets to his will. Now, the time had come. The family believed Baba had only 6 months left, and Kunle had no intention of waiting that long to claim his place. He bent forward slightly, his agbada sweeping the floor, and spoke in a voice meant to sound respectful but firm. "Baba, you need to rest now. You cannot be stressing yourself with Adewale Holdings at this stage. Allow me to handle the company. I am your first son. I will not let the family down." Chief Adewale's tired eyes studied his son in silence. He coughed weakly, adjusting his wrapper as if too feeble to reply. Inside, however, his heart burned. He recognized the ambition in Kunle's tone. It was not love speaking, it was hunger. But for now he remained quiet, only nodding faintly. Kunle took that nod as approval, a silent coronation. Straightening up, he felt the weight of an invisible crown settle on his head. The very next morning, Kunle stormed into the headquarters of Adewale Holdings in Victoria Island, his convoy of black SUVs causing a stir in the parking lot. Staff members whispered as he strutted into the lobby, flanked by 2 of his flashy friends dressed in designer suits. His presence filled the air with tension, the kind of tension that made secretaries lower their eyes and junior staff step aside nervously. Inside the boardroom, a long mahogany table gleamed under the fluorescent lights. The seats were filled with directors, senior managers, and long-serving staff who had built the company brick by brick alongside Chief Adewale. They were expecting a routine briefing, but what they got instead was Kunle's bold declaration. He slammed his palm on the table and announced, "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. From today, I am the acting chairman of Adewale Holdings. Baba is very sick. The doctor says he may not return to this office again. I will be handling all operations henceforth." A stunned silence followed. The directors exchanged shocked glances. Mr. Bello, the company's oldest staff member who had served faithfully for over 30 years, rose slowly from his seat. His gray hair and tired eyes bore the weight of loyalty and sacrifice. Clearing his throat, he spoke with quiet firmness. "With all due respect, young master, Baba is still alive. He may be sick, but he has not appointed anyone in his place. Should we not wait for his words?" Kunle's jaw tightened. His pride flared like a flame touched by petrol. He leaned forward and hissed, "Mr. Bello, are you questioning me in my father's company? This is not a matter for debate. I am the first son. I am the new face of Adewale Holdings. Accept it or leave." The room shifted uncomfortably. A few nodded, unsure of what else to do, while others looked away in silence. But Mr. Bello stood his ground. "We only want the company safe. Perhaps a team can support you until Chief recovers enough to speak." Kunle's eyes flashed with anger. He slammed his fist on the table. "I said enough. If you cannot respect me, then you have no place here." Turning sharply to the HR manager, he barked, "Fire all of them. Every old staff loyal to my father. I don't want to see their faces tomorrow." The HR manager hesitated, his hands trembling, but Kunle's glare was unrelenting. Within minutes, security men were summoned. Shocked employees, many of whom had given their youth to the company, were escorted out of the building like criminals. Mr. Bello's voice cracked with grief as he shook his head. "I served your father like a brother. Is this how you repay us?" Kunle did not flinch. He adjusted his agbada, smirked, and turned his back as loyalists of his father were thrown out one by one. In their place, he brought in his own circle of flashy friends and opportunists, men more interested in parties than profits, but who hailed him like a king. To Kunle, this was power. To the workers, it was the beginning of ruin. The following weeks became a spectacle. Kunle's recklessness painted Lagos red. He purchased a brand new Range Rover, its glossy black body glinting under the sun as he drove through the streets like royalty. Weekend trips to Abuja became routine, where he spent millions hosting parties in luxury hotels. Women flocked to him, not because of who he was, but because of what he now controlled. And Kunle loved every moment, every cheer, every fake smile that made him feel like more than just the son of Chief Adewale. He soon unveiled his grand idea, a fashion line to rival international brands. Without consultation, he approved millions for designs, fabrics, and a massive billboard. In Acacia bearing his face beside the slogan, "Kunle Adewale, the future of fashion." Workers muttered under their breath, shaking their heads. "Kunle go finish this company," they said in Yoruba and Pidgin. "This one no sabi business. He won turn Adewale Holdings to boutique." At home, the tension deepened. Rose watched helplessly as rumors of her brother's excesses spread through the servants and filtered back to her father's ears. Chief Adewale lay in his room, his cough louder than ever, but his mind sharper than steel. Each report pierced him like a dagger, but he kept his role intact. He had asked for truth, and truth was pouring out in streams of greed. The breaking point came when Tunda, the second son, confronted Kunle in the company office. He barged into the boardroom, his voice raised, his face red with fury. "Kunle, what is wrong with you? Why are you acting like Baba is already dead? Why are you ruining everything he built?" Kunle leaned back arrogantly in the chairman's seat, his legs crossed, his hands clasped. "Wake up, Tunde. Baba has 6 months left. I'm just preparing ahead. You should be grateful I am carrying the weight. Or do you think you are smarter because you lived abroad?" The words ignited Tunde's temper. He stepped closer, pointing a finger in his brother's face. "Stop this madness before you destroy everything. You will not drag Baba's legacy through the mud." Kunle smirked, then shoved him back. "Don't raise your voice in my office." Tunde's fist flew before anyone could stop him, connecting with Kunle's jaw. The boardroom erupted into chaos. Security rushed in, dragging the brothers apart as workers whispered in shock. For the first time, the Adewale name was being tarnished not by outsiders, but by its own blood. By evening, news of the fight had reached the mansion. Rose sat silently beside her father's bed, spooning pap into his mouth with trembling hands. Her lips moved in silent prayer, begging God to hold their family together. Upstairs, the sound of her whispered prayer mingled with her father's shallow breaths. But downstairs, another sound rose like a storm. That night, music blasts from the mansion. Kunle's party roars while Rose kneels praying beside her father. Where everyone counted days, Rose counted breaths. The Adewale mansion had grown colder with each passing day. The prayers that once thundered from Madame Funk's lips had quieted. Yetunde had retreated into her own world, visiting her father only when it was convenient. Kunle was too busy basking in his newfound authority at Adewale Holdings, and Tunde was almost always away, chasing business that nobody in the family could fully explain. But in the midst of fading devotion and hollow excuses, one presence remained steady as the heartbeat of the house: Rose, the youngest child of Chief Adewale. Every morning before the cock crowed, she woke up, tied her wrapper tightly, and went into the kitchen. She rolled up her sleeves and prepared yam porridge herself, refusing to leave it to the servants. She stirred the pot slowly, whispering quiet prayers into the steam, asking God to give her father strength. Carrying the steaming bowl upstairs, she balanced it carefully on a tray. Inside the master bedroom, the air was thick with the smell of medicine and the faint sting of disinfectant. But Rose never wrinkled her nose. She approached her father's bedside, her eyes soft but determined. "Baba, please eat small," she said gently, blowing on each spoonful before placing it to his lips. Chief Adewale opened his mouth weakly, chewing slowly, his eyes glistening. Each time she fed him, he felt the weight of her love more than the food itself. When his cough shook his body violently, Rose placed the bowl aside and massaged his chest with her small hands, whispering, "Easy, Baba. Breathe slowly. I am here." She dabbed his forehead with a wet towel, pressing it gently to cool the fever that was more performance than reality, yet no less painful to witness. At night, when the mansion fell into silence, Rose refused to retreat to the comfort of her own room. Instead, she spread a mat beside her father's bed and lay down, one hand always reaching up to hold his. Sometimes she would wake at midnight to find his eyes open, staring at the ceiling. "Baba, are you in pain?" she would whisper. And even when he shook his head, she stayed awake, humming old Yoruba lullabies she remembered from childhood, until his breathing softened. One evening, overwhelmed by the growing negligence of the family, Rose approached her mother, Madame Funke, who was sitting in the living room scrolling through her phone. Kneeling at her feet, Rose pleaded, "Mommy, let's take Baba abroad. Let's try London or America. Maybe there is hope. Maybe doctors there will find a cure." Her voice cracked with desperation, her eyes red from crying. But Funke only sighed, waving her hand dismissively. "Rose, stop stressing me. It's too expensive. What if he dies there? All that money wasted. Let him rest in peace here. Lauren will decide." Rose's lips trembled. She wanted to scream, but instead she walked away silently, her heart breaking. That night, she curled up on the mat beside her father, covering her mouth with her wrapper as she cried quietly into the darkness. She did not want him to hear her sobs, but he did. His ears caught every muffled tear, and it tore at him more than any cough ever could. The servants in the house noticed Rose's sacrifice. They whispered among themselves in admiration. "This small girl get heart," one said in pidgin. "Na true daughter be this." Another replied, "If to say all damn children they like her." Baba, for they smile now. Even the gatemen at the gate, watching her fetch hot water and carry trays, shook their heads in respect. To them, Rose was the only true heir of Chief Adewale, not by blood, but by heart. One evening, after she had helped him sip water and wiped his mouth with a clean handkerchief, Chief Adewale turned to her, his eyes heavy with tears he could no longer hold back. His voice came out faint, but his words were sharp enough to cut into her soul. Omomi, you are my light. In all this darkness, you are the only one who stayed. Rose's chest tightened, and she gripped his hand firmly. Baba, I will never leave you. No matter what happens, I am here. Even if the whole world forgets you, I will not. For a moment, Chief Adewale wanted to abandon the act, to confess that he was not truly dying, that this was all a test. But he swallowed the truth and allowed the lie to continue, because in her vow he had found what he needed, proof that true love still existed within his family, even if it was only in one heart. The contrast between upstairs and downstairs could not have been sharper. While Rose wiped her father's brow and whispered prayers into his ears, Kunli's voice roared from the living room downstairs, surrounded by friends, music, and laughter. The thump of Afrobeat music shook the chandeliers, glasses clinked, and the scent of expensive whiskey drifted through the halls. To Kunli, life was a party, and his father's sickness was nothing more than an opportunity. Chief Adewale listened to the distant laughter through the walls and felt another crack in his heart. He closed his eyes, his hand still held tightly by Rose, and whispered silently to himself, So this is the family I raised. One daughter holding me like a treasure, and others already dancing like vultures over my grave. Meanwhile, Tunde secretly begins selling one of Baba's hotels in Abuja. Greed always finds buyers, but wisdom finds protection. While Rose spent her nights sleeping on the mat beside her father's bed, whispering prayers and wiping his sweat with trembling hands, Tunde was plotting far away from that quiet room. Unlike his elder brother Kunli, whose ambition was loud and reckless, Tunde's greed worked in silence, sharp as a blade drawn in the dark. He was not satisfied watching Kunli flaunt power at Adewale Holdings. He wanted his own empire, his own slice of wealth, and he wanted it quickly. One Monday morning, dressed in a navy blue suit and clutching a brown folder, Tunde boarded a flight to Abuja under the pretense of urgent business travel. The truth was far darker. Sitting in the plush cabin, sipping champagne provided by an airline hostess, he rehearsed the words he would say to potential buyers. He had made up his mind. He was going to sell one of his father's most prized possessions, the Sunray Grand Hotel in Abuja, a property Chief Adewale always called my golden house. By the time Tunde arrived in the capital, his calls were already lined up. He met with a group of businessmen in a sleek glass office overlooking the city. Smiling confidently, he placed the hotel's papers on the table. Gentlemen, I am offering you a chance to own one of the most prestigious hotels in Abuja. My father is dying, and soon the property will be mine. Why wait when you can buy it now? The men glanced at each other, tempted but cautious. Tunde leaned back, grinning. I can make it happen quietly. Just name your price. What Tunde didn't know was that he was not the only one playing the game. Back in Lagos, Barrister John had already suspected that the second son might make such a move. The lawyer had served Chief Adewale for decades, and he understood greed too well. Without wasting time, he planted trusted buyers, men loyal to him and by extension to Chief Adewale. These buyers approached Tunde pretending to be strangers, offering him what looked like a generous deal. Blinded by the thought of millions flowing into his own pocket, Tunde signed without hesitation. His pen scratched across the pages as though it were carving betrayal into the very heart of his father's legacy. Within hours, he strutted out of the Abuja office with a satisfied smile, believing he had made himself richer and freer. What he didn't know was that every single deed he had signed was already secured in Barrister John's private safe in Lagos, untouchable and hidden. The empire remained intact, protected not by the loyalty of blood, but by the wisdom of a faithful friend. Returning to Lagos, Tunde wasted no time bragging. He cornered Cynthia in the sitting room, his voice dripping with arrogance. "Do you know what I just did? I sold the hotel. Sunray Grand is gone. The money is mine now. At least I'm not sitting here crying like you and Rose." Cynthia's face turned red with fury. Her eyes widened, and she shot to her feet. "Are you mad, Tunde? That land was meant for me. Baba promised me that land years ago. How dare you sell it without telling anyone?" The argument escalated quickly. Cynthia shoved him in the chest, and Tunde laughed mockingly. "Don't be childish, Cynthia. Baba is dying. Everything's up for grabs. You should thank me for moving fast before Kunle wastes everything." Cynthia's palm cracked across his cheek. The sound echoed through the mansion like a gunshot. "Idiot!" she screamed. "You're not the only child in this house." Tunde's pride flared. His hand flew back and he slapped her hard across the face. In seconds, the sitting room turned into a battlefield. Chairs toppled, vases shattered, and servants screamed, rushing to get out of the way. Cynthia and Tunde clawed at each other, dragging clothes, shouting curses, each desperate to prove their claim to a future that wasn't even theirs yet. Rose, hearing the chaos, ran from her father's room, her wrapper flying behind her. She froze at the doorway, tears springing to her eyes at the sight of her brother and sister fighting like market traders. "Stop it! What's wrong with both of you?" she cried, her voice breaking. "Is Baba not alive? Is he not upstairs, still breathing? How can you fight over his property while he lies sick in that bed? Have you no shame?" But her cries only fueled their anger. Cynthia shouted, "Rose, stay out of this!" "You don't know what's at stake." Tunde pushed Cynthia to the floor, his chest heaving as servants tried to intervene. Rose covered her face, sobbing. Upstairs, Chief Adewale lay in his bed, his cough echoing through the silence of his room. But it was not sickness that made his chest tighten this time. It was pain. He had heard everything. The sound of shattering vases, Cynthia's scream, Rose's desperate voice. He closed his eyes, and a single tear slid down his cheek. "So this is what my children have become," he thought. "Fighting like vultures over a carcass that is not even cold." That evening, when the house finally calmed, Barrister John visited quietly. He entered the master bedroom with a soft knock, finding Rose sitting beside her father. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hands still clutching a damp handkerchief. The lawyer walked to the bedside and placed a reassuring hand on Chief Adewale's arm. "Sir, don't worry," he whispered. "Your empire is safe. Tunde thought he sold the hotel, but he didn't. I planted my people. The deeds are with me. As long as I live, no one will scatter your legacy." Chief Adewale opened his eyes slowly, his gaze heavy with both sorrow and gratitude. His lips trembled as he whispered back, "Let them expose their hearts, John. Let every secret come to light. At least now I know who is who." The lawyer nodded solemnly, his loyalty unwavering. Rose leaned against the bed frame, her face buried in her palms. She wished she could undo the madness in her family, but she knew the storm had only begun. Later that night, Madame Funke storms into Baba's room, disgust written all over her face. Not every wife is a widow in waiting, but some are. The nights in the Adewale mansion had grown heavier, weighed down not just by silence, but by neglect that crept into every corner of the house. Rose remained faithful at her father's bedside, but even her unrelenting love could not shield Chief Adewale from the sting of indifference shown by the very woman he had called wife for 35 years. One humid evening, Madame Funk entered her husband's room, a scarf tied loosely around her head, gold bangles clinking on her wrists. She paused at the door, wrinkling her nose as though she had stepped into a pit. With exaggerated disgust, she waved her hand across her face. "This room stinks of sickness," she muttered loudly enough for Rose to hear. "I cannot breathe here." Even a hospital does not smell this bad. Rose, who was sitting on a stool by her father's bed, jumped to her feet in shock. "Mommy, don't say that! Baba is here! He can hear you!" But Funk was unmoved. She glanced around the room, her eyes cold. "I cannot stay in this kind of environment. It's choking me. From today, your father will no longer sleep here. He will move to the guest room. This place is unbearable." Chief Adewale's lips trembled, but no words came out. He lay still, his eyes fixed on the ceiling, feeling the weight of humiliation pressed down on his chest harder than any illness ever could. Rose's heart pounded as she rushed to block her mother's path. "No, Mommy, please! This is Baba's room. His memories are here, his things, everything. You cannot move him to the guest room like he is a burden." Funk's eyes flashed with irritation. "Shut up, Rose! You are still a child. Don't teach me how to handle my husband. If you want to worship him, do it quietly. As for me, I cannot continue to suffocate in this stench. Driver, guards," her voice thundered through the hallways. Within minutes, 2 guards entered, looking nervous, their eyes darting between mother and daughter. Rose spread her arms wide in front of the bed, tears already streaming down her cheeks. "Don't touch him! I beg you! Leave my father here!" But Funka raised her hand sharply. "Take him to the guest room. Now." The guards hesitated. Chief Adewale coughed weakly, turning his face away to hide the tears gathering in his eyes. At last, with slow steps, the guards obeyed. They lifted him gently from the bed, their faces filled with pity, while Rose sobbed helplessly. As they carried him into the guest room, the humiliation was complete. Chief Adewale had given his wife a mansion, wealth, and status, yet here he was, treated like baggage, discarded to a corner of his own home. From that day, the guest room became his prison. The Grand Master bedroom, once his sanctuary, was abandoned, and Funk rarely visited her husband again. She spent more time dressing up, her perfume trailing through the house as she went out to parties, meetings, and places she never bothered to explain. Meanwhile, the cracks in Kunle's leadership widened until they threatened to split the company apart. His reckless spending and arrogance had turned Adewale Holdings into a sinking ship. Suppliers who had once lined up eagerly to do business with Chief Adewale began to withdraw, refusing to deliver goods until old debts were paid. The accounts dried up, salaries went unpaid, and whispers of collapse spread through the corridors of the Victoria Island office. In the mansion, Rose begged Kunle to change his ways. One evening, she cornered him in the living room, her eyes swollen from crying. "Brother Kunle, please," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "Call back the old staff. The men and women you sacked, they know the roots of the company. They can save us. They can guide you." Kunle scoffed, waving his glass of whiskey. "Never. Those people were loyal to Baba, not me. I am the chairman now. I don't need their advice." "But you are ruining everything," Rose cried. "Baba's sweat, his sacrifice, you are destroying it." With your pride, Kunle leaned closer, his voice sharp. "Go back to your sick room, Rose. Stay with your Baba and leave business to men." He stormed out, slamming the door, leaving Rose trembling with anger and despair. Family dinners, once vibrant affairs filled with laughter and stories, became silent battlegrounds. The clinking of cutlery against plates was the loudest sound at the table. Kunle sat with his phone in hand, scrolling through messages from friends. Tunde ate quickly, his mind elsewhere, his eyes distant. Cynthia barely looked up from her plate. Funka arrived late, if at all, usually dressed in fine lace or ankara, ready to dash out again. Rose alone tried to keep the atmosphere alive, offering food to her father and speaking softly. but the silence of her siblings suffocated every attempt. In the guest room, Chief Adewale shed secret tears. Each night when Rose finally drifted off to sleep on her mat, he stared at the ceiling, his heart groaning with pain. He thought of the years he had spent building an empire, the countless hours in boardrooms, the sleepless nights securing contracts, the sweat that had soaked his agbada during struggles in Balogan Market. He remembered the promises he made to his wife under the stars in their youth, when they had nothing but dreams. He remembered carrying his children in his arms when they were small, feeding them, teaching them how to walk, paying for their education abroad. Now, in his moment of weakness, they had turned their backs. Even Funk, the woman who once swore to stand by him in sickness and health, had abandoned him for the comfort of perfume and parties. One night, after another coughing fit, he whispered to himself, "Is this how my story will end? With loneliness in the midst of riches, with betrayal in the house I built?" His voice broke, and the tears flowed freely until Rose woke up and held his hand, kissing it softly, whispering, "Papa, don't cry. I am here." The contrast was unbearable. Upstairs in the guest room, an old man wept quietly into the night, comforted only by his youngest daughter's hands. Downstairs, Kunle's reckless laughter sometimes returned with friends, bottles of champagne popping, music blasting from speakers that made the walls tremble. It was as if two different worlds existed under one roof, one filled with sacrifice and sorrow, the other filled with waste and noise. The storm inside the mansion grew thicker each day. And then, one afternoon, Madame Funk returned home earlier than usual. Her gal was tied high, her wrapper bright and new, her face glowing with makeup. Behind her walked a tall, broad-shouldered young man carrying a small leather bag. His shirt was neatly ironed, his smile rehearsed. The servants exchanged glances, whispering nervously as Funk clapped her hands for attention. "Everyone," she announced proudly, her voice ringing through the sitting room, "meet Mr. Ben. He is our new personal driver." Days later, Funk walks in with a young man, introducing him as our new personal driver. Betrayal entered through the gate in a crisp white shirt. Madame Funk Adewale had begun to feel a kind of emptiness she had not confessed to anyone, not even to herself. To outsiders, she was the elegant wife of a billionaire, still glowing in her lace and giel, her wrists heavy with gold, her life the picture of comfort. But behind closed doors, her heart was restless, her body craving pleasures she claimed her husband could no longer give. The day she met her friend Margaret, the seed of betrayal was planted. Margaret lived in Ikoyi, a woman of boldness and sharp tongue, known for saying what others only dared to think. Funk visited her one afternoon, dressed in her finest lace, her perfume trailing through the sitting room. After exchanging pleasantries, Margaret leaned close, her eyes glinting with mischief. "Funk, my sister, I heard Chief is very sick. Stage 4 cancer, Abi. I'm sorry, but tell me the truth. How are you coping?" Funk sighed heavily, folding her arms across her chest. "Coping? I'm lonely, Margaret. No one to talk to. No one to hold me. He just coughs all day. I'm still young. I'm still a woman. Is this how I will spend the rest of my life?" Margaret raised her brows, her lips curving into a sly smile. "That means he can no longer satisfy you, Abi?" My sister, let me tell you the truth. Life is too short to waste. You're still beautiful. Men are out there dying for women like you. Find pleasure. Don't let yourself rot because of a sick old man." Funk laughed nervously, shaking her head. "Margaret, you want me to commit sin?" Margaret leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Sin? Is it sin to feed your body what it needs? You have been faithful long enough. It's time to live, Funka. Take my advice." That night, Funk lay in her bed tossing and turning. Her husband coughed faintly in the guest room, Rose by his side while she stared at the ceiling, Margaret's words ringing in her ears. Find pleasure. You are still young. The next day, she visited her usual spa in Ikeja, hoping to distract herself, but fate was waiting for her. At the spa, she met Ben. He was tall, muscular, with the kind of charm that dripped from his smile. A gym instructor by trade, he worked part-time as a massage therapist, and when he offered to relieve the tension in her shoulders, she felt her body respond in ways she had long suppressed. His voice was soft, his hands confident, his compliments intoxicating. By the time she left the spa, she had his number saved in her phone. Their meetings began innocently at first, coffee here, lunch there, but soon they escalated. Within weeks, they were meeting in hotels across Lagos, hiding in the shadows of luxury suites. Funk felt alive again, her laughter echoing through hotel corridors as Ben whispered sweet words in her ear. You deserve to be loved, he would say. You are too beautiful to be ignored. And she believed him. Back in the mansion, her visits to Chief Adewale's room dwindled until they stopped altogether. Rose was left to bear the burden alone, feeding, cleaning, and comforting her father, while Funk spent her nights in the arms of another man. To the servants, it was clear. Madame had abandoned her husband. They whispered among themselves, but none dared speak too loudly. Then came the day she shocked everyone. Walking into the mansion with her head high, Funk introduced Ben as their new personal driver. Dressed in a crisp white shirt tucked neatly into black trousers, Ben carried a small leather bag and smiled politely. The staff exchanged worried glances, but no one dared question her. From today, Funk declared proudly, Ben will drive me anywhere I want to go. He will be my personal driver. Kunle smirked but said nothing. Tunde rolled his eyes, muttering under his breath. Cynthia stared, suspicious but quiet. Only Rose felt the full weight of the truth pressing against her chest. Her eyes followed Ben as he settled into the boys' quarters, her heart screaming what her lips could not yet say. This man was not just a driver. Her suspicions grew when she noticed her mother's new glow, the way she laughed at nothing when Ben was around, the way her perfume lingered longer, the way she left the mansion at odd hours. Rose's heart burned with anger, but she had no proof. Until one night. She could not sleep, the heaviness in her chest too much to bear. As she walked through the corridor toward the kitchen, she noticed the main living room lights were still on. Curious, she turned toward the boys' quarters, where faint giggles and whispers floated through the night air. Her steps slowed. Her heartbeat quickened. The closer she got, the clearer the sound became. Low laughter, a moan, the rustle of clothing. Rose's eyes widened. With trembling hands, she pushed open the door. And there it was. Her mother, Madame Funk, sitting on Ben's lap, both half-dressed, their faces pressed close in a lover's whisper. Funk's wrapper was loose, her headscarf thrown carelessly to the side. Ben's shirt hung open, his hand resting on her waist. "Mama!" Rose's voice cracked like thunder, shaking the small room. Funk jumped in shock, stumbling to her feet. Ben scrambled, grabbing his shirt, his face pale with fear. He bolted for the door, fleeing half-dressed, his slippers flying in opposite directions. Rose stood frozen, her chest heaving, her eyes filled with tears of rage and betrayal. "Mama, what is this? What are you doing? Baba is upstairs, weak, suffering, and this is what you are doing? With the driver you brought into this house?" Funk's face twisted with shame and anger. "Rose, shut your mouth. You don't understand." "I don't understand." Rose's voice shook with fury. "You abandoned him. You left him alone like he doesn't matter. You chose your own pleasure over your husband who gave you everything. How can you call yourself a wife? How can you call yourself a mother?" Breathing hard, Funk pointed a trembling finger at her daughter. "Listen to me, Rose. Don't you ever tell anyone what you saw. Not your brothers, not your sisters. If you open your mouth, I swear you will regret it." Rose's tears spilled over, but her resolve hardened. She turned and walked out, her shoulders shaking, her heart shattering into pieces. That night, she sat beside her father's bed, wiping his face as he slept. Silent sobs racked her body as she whispered into the darkness, "We must leave this house, Baba. We must leave before this place destroys us both." Rose cries beside father's bed that night, whispering, "We must leave this house. What the mansion withheld, the village gave freely." The night Rose caught her mother in the arms of another man broke something inside her forever. She cried until her body shook, sitting beside her father's bed in the guest room, watching his frail figure rise and fall with every breath. She knew then that she could no longer allow the mansion to suffocate him, no longer watch while his children fought, his wife strayed, and his empire crumbled. The house that should have been his haven had become his prison. That very night, she whispered into his ear, "Baba, we must leave this house. Let us go to the village. Maybe there you will find peace." The next morning, Rose quietly made arrangements with the mansion driver, the only servant she trusted. She packed a small bag of clothes, a flask of hot pap, and her father's medicines. At dusk, while the rest of the family was scattered, Kunle at a bar in Victoria Island, Itunde on one of his endless business trips, Cynthia locked away in her room scrolling through her phone, and Madame Funke absent with Ben, Rose guided her father into the car. His body trembled, but his eyes glowed faintly with gratitude. Without fanfare, without permission, without a single goodbye, they left the gates of the Lekki mansion behind. Hours later, as the car turned onto the dusty red roads of Ogun State, Chief Adewale felt something stir inside him. It was not illness, it was memory. He looked out of the window at the palm trees swaying, the children running barefoot, the huts with zinc roofs, and for the first time in weeks, his heart felt lighter. By the time they reached the family compound, word had already spread. Chief is back. Chief is sick. The entire compound came alive. Aunties, uncles, cousins, and neighbors poured in, some carrying baskets of fruits, others bringing palm wine, cola nuts, and yams. Elderly men leaned on their walking sticks, their eyes moist with sorrow at the sight of the once powerful man now looking so frail. Women clapped their hands in pity, their voices breaking into wails of lamentation. But beneath the tears was something missing. In the mansion, love, genuine love. "Ah, Chief Adewale," one elderly man said, his voice trembling. "You are the one who built our school when government abandoned us. You are the one who gave us borehole water when our children were drinking from the stream. We cannot let you suffer. We will pray. We will fight with you," others echoed. "This man fed us when we had nothing. He gave our sons jobs. He sponsored our daughters. We will not forget." Rose watched silently as villagers crowded around her father, their voices rising in songs of encouragement, their hands lifting in prayers. She compared it to the cold, distant mansion where wealth had blinded eyes and hardened hearts. Here, where there was no gold, no marble, no chandeliers, she saw true riches, gratitude, compassion, and sincerity. Every evening, the compound buzzed with activity. Women brought steaming bowls of amala, eforiro, and pepper soup. Hunters arrived with bushmeat. Children ran around the yard, their laughter chasing away sorrow. Palm wine flowed into calabashes, and elders sat in circles, raising their hands to heaven, praying loudly for Chief's recovery. Their words, simple yet powerful, wrapped around him like a healing balm. One afternoon, the villagers sent for a herbalist known for his wisdom and powerful medicines. He arrived tall and commanding, his dark skin painted with white chalk, his bag heavy with roots, herbs, and bottles filled with concoctions. He entered the small mud-walled room where Chief lay, the air thick with incense. Sitting beside him, the herbalist gazed into his eyes quietly. as though searching for something beyond flesh. After a long pause, he spoke softly. "Chief, I see strength in your eyes. You are not as weak as they told me. This sickness, it does not sit in your spirit." Chief Adewale sighed deeply. For weeks he had carried the secret alone, telling no one but Barrister John and Dr. Maxwell. But something about the herbalist's gaze felt penetrating, almost divine. He lowered his voice and confessed, "Because I'm not sick. I never had cancer. This was all a plan, a test. I wanted to know who truly loved me when I could no longer stand, when I could no longer give." The herbalist blinked, then sat back, his lips curling into a slow smile. "Ah, so that is it. You pretended weakness to test the hearts of your family. Chief, you are not just wealthy, you are wise. Many men fear death, but you used it as a mirror to see truth." Chief's voice broke as he continued. "I have seen their hearts. My wife abandoned me. My sons fight like animals, selling what I built. Only my last daughter stayed, only Rose. She fed me, she cleaned me, she held me when no one else would. She is my light." The herbalist turned toward Rose, who stood quietly in the corner, her wrapper tied firmly, her eyes moist. He nodded slowly. "Yes, your daughter is your light. The gods bless those who honor their parents. You, young woman, will carry his name beyond his years. Remember this, wealth without love is sand in the wind, but love, even in poverty, is gold that never fades." Rose pressed her hands together, tears sliding down her cheeks. She bent and touched the ground respectfully before the herbalist, whispering, "Thank you, sir. Thank you." From that day, something shifted in her spirit. Though the battles ahead were still daunting, Rose carried a renewed strength, a conviction that her father was not alone, that she was not fighting in vain. Each night, as the compound filled with songs and prayers, Chief Adewale sat under the mango tree, wrapped in a thick wrapper, his eyes lifted to the stars. The cool village breeze caressed his skin, and for the first time in many weeks he smiled. Here, in the village he had once left to chase wealth, he found the love the mansion had denied him. But even in that peace, he knew it could not last forever. The mansion in Lagos still stood. His wife and children were still there. The empire he had built with sweat was still at risk. And so, as he sipped from a calabash of palm wine one evening, he whispered to himself, "This is not where the story ends. I must return to Lagos. I must finish what I started. But Baba knows. He must return to Lagos to finish what he started. Some truths are too heavy to share, unless love is strong enough to hold them." The village breeze carried a peace that the Lekki mansion had long forgotten. Each evening, Chief Adewale sat beneath the wide branches of the mango tree, wrapped in a thick wrapper, the smell of firewood and roasted maize drifting through the compound. Children's laughter echoed in the distance, villagers came daily with gifts, and Rose remained close, feeding him and tending to his every need. For the first time in weeks, his soul felt lighter. Yet deep within, a truth pressed against his chest, begging to be released. That night, under a sky thick with stars, he motioned for Rose to sit beside him. The wooden chair creaked as she settled in, her wrapper brushing against the dust. Chief's eyes glistened in the faint glow of the lantern. His lips parted, his voice low, almost trembling. "Rose, my daughter, there is something I must tell you. Something no one else knows." Rose tilted her head, her brow furrowed. "Baba, what is it?" Taking a deep breath, Chief whispered, "I was never sick." The words struck her like a thunderclap. Rose froze, her mouth opening but no words coming out. Slowly, her hand flew to her lips, covering them as her eyes widened in shock. "Baba, what do you mean?" she stammered. I do not have cancer, he continued, his voice steady now. I was never dying. All this was a plan, a test. I wanted to know who truly loved me, who would stand by me if I became weak and helpless. So I pretended he paused, his gaze fixed on her face. And, my daughter, the truth was revealed. Rose's eyes flooded with tears, spilling down her cheeks as she shook her head in disbelief. All this time? The coughing, the weakness, the doctor's words, everything? Chief nodded slowly. Yes, Barrister John and Dr. Maxwell helped me. They alone knew the truth. Everyone else, I wanted their hearts to be shown. And I saw it clearly, Rose. Your mother abandoned me. Your brothers turned to greed. Your sister thought of herself. But you stayed. You fed me. You cleaned me. You prayed for me. You carried me like I was your child. Oh, Momi, you are my light. At those words, Rose broke completely. She dropped to her knees beside him, clutching his hand, sobbing into his lap. Papa, how could they do this to you? How could they betray you like this? But I promise you, no matter what, I will stand by you forever. Chief's eyes softened, his hand trembling as he placed it on her head. For the first time since the plan began, he felt peace. He had feared he would find no loyalty, no love. But in Rose, he had found everything he needed. You have given me hope again, he whispered. With you, I am not afraid of tomorrow. The following morning, word spread quickly through the compound that Chief Adewale had spoken the truth to his daughter. The elders, hearing of his wisdom, gathered beneath the mango tree. They raised their voices in prayers, blessing father and daughter alike. May the God of our fathers protect you, they intoned. May the enemies of your house be scattered. May your daughter never lack, for she honored you when others turned away. Their prayers rose into the sky like smoke from incense, and both father and daughter felt renewed. That afternoon, preparations for the journey back to Lagos began. Rose moved with determination, her eyes sharper, her heart fortified. She knew the mansion was still full of shadows, Kunle's arrogance, Tunde's betrayal, Cynthia's selfishness, and her mother's unfaithfulness. But she no longer felt weak. She was ready for the confrontation. Chief Adewale, too, felt a new strength in his bones. Though he had been pretending, the weight of betrayal had made him weak in spirit. Now, the love of his daughter and the blessings of the elders gave him courage. He stood straighter, his steps firmer, his voice steadier. On the morning of their departure, the villagers gathered once more. Women carried baskets of plantains and fruits to the car. Men lifted their hands in farewell. Children clapped and shouted, "Bye-bye, Chief! Come back soon!" Elders shook his hand firmly, pressing their foreheads against his in respect. As Rose helped her father into the car, one elderly man called out, his voice deep with sincerity, "Chief, remember, you left riches in Lagos, but you found love here. Do not forget what this village gave you." Chief nodded, his eyes wet. "I will not forget. This village has reminded me of what truly matters." The car door shut softly. The driver started the engine, and slowly they rolled out of the compound, the villagers waving until the car disappeared down the dusty red road. Inside, Rose clasped her father's hand tightly. "Baba, we will face them together," she whispered. Hours later, as the sun dipped behind the horizon, the familiar skyline of Lagos came into view. The glittering lights of the city reflected off tall buildings, but to Chief Adewale, it felt less like a homecoming and more like a battlefield waiting for him. His heart beat steadily. The time for pretense was over. Finally, the car turned into Lekki, approaching the massive gates of the Adewale mansion. The guards, who had been leaning lazily on the wall, straightened instantly at the sight of the vehicle. They squinted into the headlights, and then their jaws dropped. The car rolled to a halt, the door opened, and out stepped Chief Adewale, not coughing, not limping, but walking strong, his shoulders broad, his head lifted high. At the mansion gates, guards freeze. Baba steps out, walking strong. They waited like vultures, but the corpse walked back home. The night air in Lekki was heavy with salt from the sea as the Adewale mansion gates creaked open. The guards, who had spent months watching the house slip into chaos, straightened suddenly, their eyes nearly leaping from their sockets. They could not believe what they saw. From the black SUV that rolled slowly into the compound, Chief Adewale stepped out, not leaning on anyone, not coughing, not weak, but walking tall, his white agbada flowing like a king returned from exile. One guard's cap slipped off his head. The other muttered, "Jesu!" "Chief! Chief is alive!" They both saluted, trembling as the man they thought would never rise again strode past them, his eyes fixed firmly on the mansion's golden doors. Rose walked proudly at his side, holding a small bag, her face calm but her heart thundering. Inside the mansion, the atmosphere was anything but calm. Cynthia was sprawled across the couch, scrolling on her phone lazily. When the door opened and she looked up, her fingers froze mid-swipe. Her phone slipped from her hands, clattering to the marble floor. For a moment, she stared like she had seen a ghost. Then, with a scream that shook the chandelier, she leapt to her feet. "Daddy!" she cried, tears streaming instantly. She rushed across the room and threw her arms around him. "Daddy, you're alive. You're walking. You're strong." From the staircase above, Tunde had been descending with his headphones around his neck. At Cynthia's scream, he frowned, irritated. But when his eyes landed on the figure in white agbada, his knees nearly buckled. His mouth opened, but no words came out. He gripped the banister tightly, his face pale, his lips trembling. For once, the man of loud arguments and arrogance was silent. Kunle was in the dining area with a bottle of wine in hand, laughing with two of his flashy friends. The sound of Cynthia's scream drew him forward. He stepped into the living room, his smirk still plastered on his face, until his eyes met his father's. The bottle slipped from his hand, crashing to the floor, shards scattering across the marble. His friends froze, exchanging panicked looks. Kunle staggered backward, his lips moving but no sound escaping. "No, no. Impossible." And then came Madame Funk. She stepped out from the hallway, her jewel slightly tilted, her perfume heavy in the air. At first, her face carried its usual disdain, but the moment she saw him, her knees buckled. She clutched the wall for support, gasping, "Jésus-mi, darling." Her voice cracked, and for a moment it seemed she might faint. The color drained from her face, her gold bangles rattling as her hands shook uncontrollably. The entire house froze. The air felt thick with fear, guilt, and disbelief. No one moved, no one breathed, as the man they had all treated like a corpse stood tall before them. Rose broke the silence. Walking beside her father with steady steps, she looked at each of them one by one, her eyes cold, her words sharp. "You ask how? What happened? He only needed love." That was all. Her voice cut through them like a whip. Cynthia flinched, lowering her head. Tunde looked away, his jaw clenched. Kunle's hands trembled, his pride melting into shame. And Funka, still gripping the wall, avoided her daughter's piercing eyes. Chief Adewale said nothing. He did not look at any of them. His silence was louder than thunder, heavier than stone. Without a word, he walked slowly past his children, past his wife, past the memories of betrayal etched into every corner of the mansion. His footsteps echoed through the vast hall, each one striking their hearts like a drumbeat of judgment. When he reached the staircase, Rose by his side, the family parted like water, making way for the man they thought they had buried in their hearts. He ascended slowly, his white agbada trailing behind him, his head lifted high. Not a cough, not a stumble, not a hint of weakness, only strength, dignity, and the silent fire of a man who had seen enough. The family gathered below, whispering in fear as they watched him vanish into the upper corridor. Cynthia clutched her chest, tears streaking down her face. Is this a miracle? Is this God's hand? Tunde shook his head violently, his voice hoarse. No, no, this cannot be. The doctor said 6 months. He said... His words trailed into silence, his face pale. Kunle clenched his fists, his pride struggling to mask his terror. He muttered to himself, he knows, he must know. His voice cracked, betraying his fear. Funka, still leaning on the wall, whispered, Oluwa, what have I done? But her words carried no conviction, no true remorse, only fear of the reckoning she knew was coming. Rose lingered at the top of the staircase, watching her family crumble in panic. For the first time, she felt a strange power in her heart, not pride, not arrogance, but the strength of truth. She had stood by her father, and now the truth was standing with her. Upstairs, Chief Adewale entered his room. The guest room where he had been humiliated was abandoned. He walked back into his master bedroom, his rightful place. Slowly, he approached the large oak cabinet in the corner. His hands, though trembling slightly, carried determination. He knelt, reached under the bed, and pulled out a small black key hidden in a cloth pouch. Unlocking the cabinet, he brought out a secret box. Inside the box lay a treasure not of gold but of truth. Small black CCTV devices, hidden cameras he had planted in his room during the charade of sickness. He connected them to a screen, his eyes narrowing as the footage came alive. Hours upon hours of betrayal played before him, Funk's neglect, Kunle's boasting, Tunde's greed, Cynthia's selfish outbursts, and Rose's constant devotion. The mansion had not known it, but its walls had watched everything, and now so did he. He leaned back in his chair, a sad smile tugging at his lips. At last, he whispered, the truth has been recorded. Inside his room, Baba unlocks a secret box. CCTV footage reveals every betrayal. The walls of Lekki mansion had seen everything, and they remembered. In the stillness of the master bedroom, Chief Adewale sat in front of the small screen glowing on his table. The footage flickered, grainy but clear enough to pierce the heart. There was Kunle in his agbada, boasting to his friends downstairs, wine spilling as he laughed. Soon everything here will be mine. His voice rang out with careless arrogance. Another clip rolled, Tunde whispering into his phone, arranging the sale of the Sunray Grand Hotel, his lips curling into a greedy smile. Don't worry, once the old man is gone, the papers will be free. Then came Cynthia's voice, shouting angrily at her brother over the same property, her hand raised as she slapped him in the living room. And then, perhaps the most painful, Funk. The footage showed her standing in the master bedroom doorway, her face twisted with disgust. This room stinks of death, she had spat before ordering the guards to move him into the guest room. Another clip showed her slipping out of the house late at night, gale tilted, perfume clouding the air, while her husband coughed alone upstairs. The final recording seared into him. Rose, kneeling by his bed, wiping his forehead, spoon-feeding him pap, whispering, Baba, I will never leave you. The contrast cut deeper than any knife. Chief Adewale closed his eyes, his chest heaving. The mansion's walls had seen everything, and now he had proof that could not be twisted or denied. Slowly, he picked up his phone and dialed a number. John, he said firmly, come to the house now. Bring every document I gave you. It is time. By morning, Barrister John arrived, his leather folder clutched tightly in his hand. His footsteps echoed through the marble halls as he entered the master bedroom. Chief Adewale rose from his chair, not weak, not coughing, but steady as the lion he had always been. He clasped John's hand. Are the documents safe? The lawyer nodded. Everything, sir. The hotel deeds, the land, the hidden accounts. All untouched. They thought they had sold your empire, but your empire still belongs to you." "Good," Chief replied, his voice low but thunderous with meaning. "Now let us gather them. Let the truth be seen with their own eyes." Word spread quickly through the mansion. "Chief wants everyone in the sitting room." One by one, the children filed in, their faces tight with unease. Kunle straightened his agbada nervously, his pride bruised but not broken. Tunde shoved his hands into his pockets, his eyes darting around the room. Cynthia bit her nails, avoiding her father's gaze. Funk entered last, her steps shaky, her head lowered, but her perfume still clung stubbornly to the air. The atmosphere was suffocating. The air conditioner hummed quietly, but sweat glistened on foreheads. The servants lingered at the edges, whispering. For the first time in months, the family was gathered together, not for celebration, not for mourning, but for reckoning. Chief Adewale entered slowly, his steps echoing like drumbeats. Rose walked beside him, her hand gently holding his arm. He sat in the grand chair at the head of the room, his presence silencing every whisper. When he spoke, his voice was like a hammer breaking stone. "I was never sick." The words exploded through the room. Cynthia gasped audibly, her hand flying to her chest. Tunde staggered back as though struck. Kunle shook his head violently, muttering, "No, it cannot be." Funka covered her mouth with her wrapper, her eyes darting nervously. Chief's eyes swept across them, sharp as a blade. "Yes, I pretended. I wanted to see your hearts, to know if you loved me or only what I gave you. And now I know the truth." Kunle found his voice first. "Baba, it was not like that. We thought you were dying. We only wanted to—" "Silence!" Chief thundered, his palm striking the arm of his chair. Kunle's words died in his throat. Barrister John stepped forward, placing the thick leather folder on the glass table. With deliberate slowness, he opened it. Deeds, contracts, bank papers, all intact. He dropped them with a thud. "Here, Chief. Everything is safe. None of their greed has touched your true inheritance." The sound of the folder hitting the table echoed like a gavel in a courtroom. The children stared at it with wide eyes, each page a mirror reflecting their betrayal. Chief turned to them once more. "You thought you sold my hotel. It is still mine. You thought you divided my lands. They remain untouched. You thought you buried me. But I live. I live not because of your love, but because one of you showed me what true love is." Rose sat quietly at his side, holding his hand, her eyes glistening but strong. She did not speak. She did not need to. Her presence alone was louder than any defense her siblings could muster. The silence that followed was heavier than chains. Even the ticking of the wall clock seemed deafening. The family shifted uncomfortably, their guilt crawling on their skin like ants. Chief leaned forward, his voice low but filled with finality. "This house, these walls, these recordings, they have seen all of you, and they cannot lie. Only one of you loved me, and I will show the world who it is." A father divided his wealth not by bloodlines, but by loyalty. The sitting room of the Adewale mansion felt more like a courtroom than a family gathering. The heavy chandelier above cast shadows across the marble floor, and the silence was thick enough to choke. The folder of documents lay open on the glass table, and the small screen still glowed with recordings of betrayal. Chief Adewale sat in the grand chair, like a judge ready to pronounce sentences, Rose at his side like a loyal witness. His eyes, sharp and unblinking, first turned to Kunle. The eldest son shifted uneasily in his agbada, trying to appear confident, but his trembling hands betrayed him. Chief's voice was firm, each word cutting like a blade. "Kunle, you were my pride, my first son, the one I trusted to lead Adewale Holdings into the future. But what did you do? You sacked loyal workers who built the company with me for 30 years, men and women who gave their youth to this empire. You threw them away like refuse. You replaced them with your friends, fools who knew nothing of sacrifice. Then you lavished the company's money on cars, parties, and women. You destroyed what I spent 40 years building. You are not a leader. You are a destroyer. Kunle opened his mouth to speak, but his father's glare silenced him. You wanted to be chairman before my death? Now hear this. I strip you of every inheritance. No house, no car, no land. You will never set foot in my company again. From today, you are no longer part of Adewale Holdings. Go and build your own empire. If you can, Kunle's eyes widened, his lips trembling. He fell to his knees, tears spilling onto the marble. Baba, please, I beg you, forgive me. Give me another chance. But Chief's hand cut the air sharply. Enough. Your chance is gone. He turned his gaze to Tunda, who stood stiffly with his arms crossed, though his eyes darted nervously. Chief's voice was colder now. And you, Tunde, my second son, you sold what was not yours. You carried my hotel, the Sunray Grand, my pride, and offered it like roasted corn on the street. You sold my land as though it were sand in a wheelbarrow. You betrayed me for quick cash. If not for Barrister John, my empire would be in ruins already. That hotel, that land, they were meant to be your inheritance, but you sold them with all your own hands. Now, take the money you have and go. You will never touch my company again. From today, you are barred. Tunde's tough mask crumbled. He fell to his knees beside Kunle, his head bowed. Papa, I was foolish. Greed blinded me. Please forgive me. Do not shut me out completely. But Chief's jaw tightened. When you sold my legacy, you sold your place in my heart. Leave. Next, his eyes fell on Cynthia, who sat biting her nails, tears already streaming. Chief's tone softened slightly, but his disappointment was no less sharp. Cynthia, my first daughter. You too thought of yourself. You fought your brother in the living room over property as though I were already buried. You wanted land, houses, money, anything but my love. You forgot the father who gave you a name, who sent you to the best schools, who clothed you in silk when others wore rags. Because of that, I cannot give you inheritance now. You will get nothing until you prove yourself with action, not words. Earn my forgiveness. Until then, you will work for your bread. Cynthia dropped to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. Daddy, please, don't cast me aside. I was misled. I can change. I will change. The chief turned his face away. Your actions will speak louder than your tears. Finally, his eyes rested on Funka, the woman he had once called his queen, the mother of his children. She tried to steady herself, her jewel slipping as she wiped her face with trembling fingers. Chief's voice broke for the first time, heavy with sorrow. And you, Funka. My wife of 35 years, the one who stood with me when I had nothing. I gave you comfort, riches, honor, and yet when I lay weak pretending sickness, you abandoned me. You left me to rot in a guest room. You mocked my pain. Worse, you brought shame into my house. You carried another man into this mansion, into my compound, into the boys' quarters, while I breathed under this roof. Did you think I would never know? The walls saw you. The cameras saw you. God saw you. Funk collapsed onto her knees, wailing. Darling, please. It was weakness. Forgive me, I beg you. But Chief's face hardened like stone. Do not call me darling. You have 24 hours to leave this mansion. Pack your clothes, your gold, your perfume. Leave in peace or security will throw you out. From today you are no longer my wife. Her cries filled the room, but no one moved to console her. The servants whispered behind their hands, shaking their heads. At last, Chief's voice softened as he turned to Rose. His hand reached for hers, his eyes moist, his tone filled with pride. And you, Rose, my last born. When others counted my days, you counted my breaths. When they abandoned me, you fed me with your own hands. You wiped my tears when no one else cared. You carried me to the village when I was suffocating here. You alone showed me love. For that reason, I declare before God and man, you are my heir. From today, all that I own, my houses, my lands, my hotels, my companies, everything belongs to you." Gasps filled the room. Kunle's mouth dropped open. Tunde shook his head violently. Cynthia covered her face in disbelief. Funk let out another cry of anguish. Chief raised his hand, silencing them. "Rose is the new CEO of Adewale Holdings. Barrister John will recall every loyal worker Kunle sacked. The company will rise again under her leadership. This is my final word." The lawyer nodded, already pulling out the letters of reinstatement. Rose sat frozen, tears streaming down her cheeks as she whispered, "Baba, thank you." He smiled faintly, placing his hand over hers. "No, my daughter. Thank you, but can one young woman rebuild an empire destroyed by greed? The empire nearly died of greed, but love rebuilt it stronger." A year had passed since the day Chief Adewale's mansion shook with judgment and inheritance was rewritten. What once seemed like a crumbling empire was now alive again, its roots watered not by wealth alone, but by loyalty, wisdom, and love. The story that began with betrayal had taken a new turn, and at the center of it all stood Rose, the daughter once overlooked, now the light of her father's legacy. Under her leadership, Adewale Holdings transformed. The boardroom that had once been filled with flashy friends and reckless decisions now hummed with discipline and vision. Rose reinstated the loyal workers her brother Kunle had sacked, men and women who returned with gratitude and fire in their hearts. They called her Madam Rose the Wise, not out of fear but out of respect. She listened when they spoke, she valued their sacrifices, and she reminded them that the company was not just brick and glass, but blood and sweat. Within 12 months, profits doubled. Old partners returned, new contracts flooded in, and the scars left by Kunle's mismanagement began to heal. Branches opened in Abuja, Port Harcourt, and even Accra, Ghana. At every launch, Rose stood tall in elegant ankara or lace, her speeches carrying not just ambition, but sincerity. Investors whispered among themselves, "This young woman has the heart of a lion and the wisdom of an elder." In his office on the top floor, Chief Adewale sat in a leather chair by the window watching it all. Though he had handed over power, he often came just to observe, sipping his tea slowly, his eyes moist with pride. "Olorun, thank you," he whispered often. "I nearly lost everything, but you showed me the heart of one true child." Seeing Rose in the boardroom, commanding respect yet carrying humility, filled him with a peace he had not felt in years. But not all of his children shared in the glory. Kunle, stripped of his inheritance, struggled to find footing elsewhere. His pride had driven many investors away, and though he tried to start small ventures, failure followed him like a shadow. He lived in rented apartments now, far from the grandeur he once flaunted. At night, he stared at his ceiling, haunted by the echoes of his father's words. "You are not a leader. You are a destroyer." Tunde fared little better. With the money he had once thought was profit, he tried to launch a logistics company. But greed and carelessness followed him there too. Trucks broke down, workers complained, and debts piled up. People whispered, he had a golden inheritance but wasted it. Though he fought to maintain a brave face, he often envied the stability Rose carried like a crown she never asked for. Cynthia, however, began a slow path toward redemption. Stung by her father's rebuke, she humbled herself. She volunteered at a non-profit in Lagos, working with widows and orphans. Slowly, she began to understand the weight of sacrifice and service. Sometimes she came to her father with trembling hands, showing receipts of her work. "Daddy, I'm trying," she whispered, and though Chief had withheld inheritance, he watched her quietly, hoping her actions would one day heal the wound she had caused. As for Madame Funky, she never returned. After her 24 hours expired, she left the mansion with her bags and her shame. Some said she went to Ghana with her lover. Others whispered she moved to Europe, chasing a new life. But to the Adewale family, she became a ghost, a name unspoken, a face erased from the corridors she once ruled with perfume and pride. Chief never asked for her again. Rose never mentioned her. The silence around her absence was its own kind of burial. Then came the day of the National Business Awards. The grand Echo Hotel hall glittered with chandeliers. The country's finest gathered in their best attire. CEOs, politicians, entrepreneurs, all were present. When the announcer called her name, Madame Rose Adewale, the applause thundered. Dressed in royal blue lace, gale tied high, Rose walked to the stage gracefully. The award for Businesswoman of the Year gleamed in her hands. Cameras flashed, journalists rushed forward, and her speech was broadcast across the nation. "My father taught me that wealth without love is emptiness," she began, her voice steady, her eyes shining. "This company nearly collapsed, not because of lack of money, but because of lack of loyalty. It rose again because love rebuilt it. To every worker who stayed, to every partner who returned, and to my father who showed me what true inheritance is, I dedicate this award." The hall erupted in cheers. Chief Adewale, sitting in the front row, wiped tears from his eyes. The camera caught him smiling proudly, his hand clutching his walking stick as though it were a staff of triumph. For him, this was more than an award. It was vindication that his empire had not died in vain. Back in the mansion, life carried a new rhythm. The corridors no longer echoed with reckless laughter or greedy whispers. Instead, they rang with plans, meetings, and hope. Servants moved with renewed dignity, no longer treated as pawns. Workers visited, bringing reports directly to Rose. Chief often sat under the same mango tree in the compound, sipping palm wine brought from Ogun, watching his last daughter grow into the leader he had once dreamed one of his children would become. And so, 1 year later, the Adewale Empire stood not only restored, but stronger than ever. Betrayal had nearly broken it, but loyalty had saved it. Greed had almost buried it, but love had resurrected it. The true inheritance is not land, hotels, or money. The true inheritance is love, the kind that stays when wealth fails, the kind that builds when greed destroys, the kind that keeps a legacy alive when all else fades. But even empires of love face storms, and another story waits to be told. If this story touched your heart, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I love reading them. Don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who loves powerful stories. And if you're new here, subscribe now and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next story we bring to life.